Hi, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. Now, before we get started, I want you to go do something. I want you to go ask your mom or your dad or your grandma or your grandpa what time of day you were born and who else was there when you were born. Okay, go and ask them and then come right back. All right. Well, I hope you got an answer to your question. Now, if it was your mom or your dad, we kind of know how come they know what time you were born, because they were there. But what if someone else was there and told you what time of day you were born? And what if you didn't exactly trust that they knew exactly what time you were born? How would you find out? Well, you would ask someone else who was there. So if you couldn't ask your mom or your dad, who else could you ask? Who else was there when you were born? Well, the doctor or the midwife would have been there, and maybe there would have been a nurse there. So you could ask these people because they were there. They were witnesses to the fact that you were born at a certain time. And if they were a medical person, they usually write down the time as well, so you could even check it that way. So they paid a lot of attention to what time it was when you were born because that was a really important event. And you know, we were talking about when Jesus came back to life, and that was a hugely important event to everyone, including Jesus's closest friends. And you know what? There were a lot of witnesses who knew that Jesus had come back to life. And we are going to talk about some of those today. Now, in the Bible last week, we were talking about how the women, they were on their way to the tomb after Jesus had died, and they were going to anoint Jesus' body with spices. And remember, they were coming along, and they said, who's going to move that big stone away from the entrance? Remember the stone that Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus had put in front of the doorway? And not only that, but do you remember how the chief priests had gone to Pilate and asked him if they could seal the tomb and if they could post a guard there, and how he had said yes? And so the tomb is sealed and it has a guard there and it has a big stone. So how on earth were these women going to get in to be able to anoint Jesus's body with spices like they did after people died? Well, they didn't have that problem, if you recall, because when they got there, an angel had come and rolled away the stone, and he was sitting on top of the stone. And do you remember Jesus's body? It was gone because Jesus wasn't there anymore. And the angel told them that Jesus had come back to life just as he had said. And the women, they were so excited. They couldn't believe it. It was also confusing and exciting. They ran back to tell the disciples. Well, when they got there, they told the disciples their story. They said they went to the tomb and that the stone was rolled away. There was an angel sitting on top of the stone, and Jesus wasn't there. And the angel had told them that Jesus had come back to life. And the disciples, they didn't know what to think. That sounded impossible. How could it be? And Peter and John, they jumped up and they ran ahead to the tomb. Well, one of them was a faster runner than the other one. Can you guess who it was? It was actually John. So John was the fastest, and he got to the tomb first, and he looked inside, and all he could see were the linens that Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus had used to wrap Jesus' body, just lying there. Well, Peter finally got there, and he ran up to the tomb, but Peter, he ran right inside, and he looked around, and he just saw the linens too, and he saw that the cloth that had been used to wrap Jesus' head was actually folded up neatly and set off by itself. And then John went inside too, and he looked around, and he saw the same thing. Jesus wasn't there. And the Bible tells us that John believed at that point. Peter, though, he just wondered what was going on. And so he left, and John left, and Mary Magdalene, she stood outside the tomb, and she was crying because she didn't know where Jesus was. And she'd heard all these things, but she didn't know what to think. And then she heard a voice behind her. It was a man's voice, and he said, "Woman, why are you crying? Who are you looking for?" And Mary Magdalene, she thought it was the gardener. And so she said, they've taken my Lord. I don't know where they've put him. Sir, if you have moved him, please let me know where you've put him so I can go and get him. But you know what? It wasn't a gardener who was standing behind Mary. It was Jesus himself. And so Jesus said, Mary. And she recognized his voice and she turned around. She said, Rabbi. And it was Jesus. He was alive. And so Mary was the first person who saw Jesus alive. She was the first witness. So it was very, very exciting. And Jesus said, go and tell my disciples. And so she ran off to tell the disciples. In the meantime, there were 2 disciples, and they were on their way to Emmaus, which was a little town about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were walking along, and as they were walking along, they were talking about all the stuff that had happened over the past few days. Everything that had happened to Jesus, and they were talking together, and suddenly a man was there walking along with them, and he said, what are you talking about? And that man was actually Jesus. But these 2 disciples, these 2 followers of Jesus, they were kept from recognizing Jesus. And so they said to him, well, you must be a visitor, because if you haven't heard of everything that's been going on in Jerusalem, it's amazing. And so Jesus said, well, what has happened? And so there was one of Jesus's followers there, and his name was Cleopas. And Cleopas said, Jesus of Nazareth, he was an amazing prophet. He was an amazing teacher, and he spoke with power and authority. He did miracles before God and before people. And he was our chief priest. They gave him over to the Romans to be crucified, and he was killed and buried. And we thought he was going to be the Messiah, and we don't know what to think now. And then this morning, some of our women, they went to the tomb, and they were going to anoint the body. And what did they find? They said they found that the tomb was empty. They said they saw an angel sitting on the rock, and that he said that Jesus had come back to life. And 2 of our friends, Peter and John, they ran down and they checked out the tomb too, and they found everything just as the women had said. Well, Jesus said to them, why are you so foolish? Don't you know from the scriptures that all of these things had to take place to the Messiah? Why are you so slow to learn? And so then Jesus, he started teaching Cleopas and the other follower all about things from the Old Testament. Everything that had been ever talked about from Moses and the prophets, everything that had been mentioned about Jesus. And he explained it all to them. Well, they were coming close to Emmaus, and Jesus looked like he was going to keep walking on, and they begged him, oh no, please don't go, please stay with us. And you know what? It's evening, it's too much, it's too late for you to keep going. Just stay with us this night. And so Jesus went in with them, and they sat down together to eat. And Jesus, he broke bread, he prayed, he broke bread, and he started passing it out to them. And when he did that, their eyes were opened, and they recognized that it was Jesus. And then Jesus was gone. Well, Cleopas and his friend, they turned to each other and they said, didn't our hearts burn within us when he was talking to us on the road and when he was teaching us all those things from scriptures? Didn't we know in our hearts there was something different? And they were amazed, and they jumped up right then, and they went all the way back to Jerusalem. And they found the other followers of Jesus, and the disciples were with them. And the disciples, they said, it's true, Jesus is alive. Peter has seen him. So Peter, I'm going to put this on here. Peter had seen Jesus, so he was another witness. If I can get him on there. Peter had seen him, and Cleopas and the other follower. So they were all witnesses too. And then something amazing happened. So they were all in a locked room together talking about all these exciting things that had happened, and suddenly there with them, in the middle of them, Jesus appeared. And they were scared. And they said, oh my goodness. And they were terrified. And Jesus said, no, peace be with you. And he said, look, 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 it's me. It's me. And they thought it was a ghost. And he said, no, 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 I'm not a ghost. It's me. Look at my hands. Look at my feet. He said, look, touch me, feel me. He said, feel me. A ghost you can't feel, but you can feel me. It's really me. But they were still really amazed and they were overjoyed. And so finally Jesus said, okay, look, do you have anything to eat? And so they brought him a piece of broiled fish. And so he ate the fish in front of them so that they would know it was really, really him. Now, the disciples were there. So now we have Peter has seen Jesus and his brother Andrew and James and John and Matthew and Philip and Nathanael and Thaddeus and James the son of Alphaeus and Simon the Zealot. So they've all seen Jesus, but there was one disciple who wasn't there. Do you remember who it would be? It was Thomas. Thomas wasn't there. And so the disciples, they were so excited. They told Thomas what had happened. And Thomas said, no way. That's impossible. I won't believe unless I see Jesus for myself. And not only that, I need to see his hands and the nail prints in his hands and put my finger right in the holes. And I want to see the side where that soldier stabbed him to make sure he was dead. I want to put my hand in that spot right there. And only then will I believe. Well, about a week later, the disciples were once again in a locked room all together. And this time, guess who was there? Thomas was with them. And Jesus appeared right in the middle of a locked room. And he said, peace be to you. And then he said, Thomas, here are my hands. Feel them. Here's my side. Put your hand in my side. Stop doubting and believe. And you know what? Thomas did believe. Well, it was very amazing. And you know what? The Bible tells us that all of these people, we better put Thomas up here as someone who saw Jesus. All these people saw Jesus. But not only these people were witnesses to the fact that Jesus came back alive. In fact, the Bible tells us that not just 50 people, not just 100 people, not just 150 people, not just another 150 people, which would make like 300 people. But the Bible tells us that over 500 people saw Jesus. Over 500, put a big greater sign, over 500 people were witnesses to the fact that Jesus was brought back to life again. So these are two really good things that we've talked about today that prove to us that Jesus came back to life. One is the fact that there's an empty tomb. Nobody in it. Jesus isn't there because he's risen from the dead. The tomb is empty. And the other thing is that over 500 people, that's a lot of people, over 500 people saw Jesus after he was raised back to life again. Well, I am really glad that you were able to be with us today, and I hope that we will see you next time. Bye for now.